Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the panel for being here. I want to add a thank you to somebody who's not here, which is my home state paper, the Providence Journal, which has done an amazing job of covering the threats of climate change along our coasts. They've done repeated front page, above the fold articles about the risks Rhode Island's coastline is facing and how we're having to prepare. And in that spirit, they've also done a terrific job on PFAS contamination in one of our municipalities, in Burrillville, which is facing water contamination. And I would like to ask permission to put their article on Burrillville's contamination into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we have, I think, done some very good work in this committee in bipartisan fashion. We've done good work on TSCA, which ended up passing in very significant bipartisan fashion. Regrettably, we saw the Trump EPA make a hash of that bipartisan effort, and then in bipartisan fashion, we corrected it, and I actually introduced the Trump nominee for the toxic chemical section at EPA to put us back on bipartisan course. I think it's a real concern when a divided Senate comes together in bipartisan fashion on an issue like this and then finds that the agency has gone off on a partisan tear. We're supposed to be the political ones, not the agency. We saw it recently with the NRC. This committee, myself, Senator Crapo, the chairman and others have done terrific work passing bipartisan nuclear innovation bills. And what happens? The NRC, on a partisan basis, goes outside of the record of the rules proceeding that they're operating under, and unilaterally, the Republican appointees only decide something that nobody asked for in the public record, which is that nuclear facilities shouldn't be required to prepare for flood risk. I don't know how you could have a dumber decision, and the fact that they would do that on a partisan basis with such a good record of bipartisanship here on the committee is very frustrating. I think that where this committee has stood together on a bipartisan basis, agencies need to take the message and work as if they were bipartisan too, and not inject a lot of nonsense, polluter-driven partisanship into the agency's decision. For Pete's sake, if we can get over it, you ought to be able to get over it out there in the agencies. So this is a real frustration to me, and Ms. White, the American Chemistry Council, worked well with us on TSCA, I think sent helpful signals about the early enforcement, and was part of the solution that I brought Alex Dunn in, who I think is a good administrator. I hope that you are leaning in as a council to try to solve this problem in that same bipartisan spirit in which we all work together on the underlying TSCA bill and on correcting the initial enforcement.
Well, thank you again, Senator Whitehouse. As you mentioned, and as me as a toxicologist and a scientist, ACC is absolutely willing to be a constructive partner in this process and making sure that science kind of underlies this process as we evaluate how to mitigate and manage any associated risk with PFAS chemistries.
Good, because it's bipartisanship is a terrible thing to waste. And it takes all the fun out of working in a bipartisan fashion if what happens is we get kneecapped bipartisanship in an administrative agency after we have avoided partisanship here in the most partisan of branches of government. Ms. Daniels, we are likely to be taking up an infrastructure bill of some kind. There is, who knows? The president topped Speaker Pelosi's $1 trillion and said $2 trillion, so who knows what it's going to be. His budget person, Mr. Mulvaney, promptly came out and undercut the president, so we don't really quite know how that's all going to turn out. But there's a real likelihood, I think, of there being an infrastructure bill, and our side certainly wants one. And I think there's been considerable support on this committee on bipartisan basis for our share of a strong bipartisan bill, and I thank the chairman for that. What would you like to see in an infrastructure bill that would help your constituency deal with this contamination problem?
Thank you for the question. Yes, we certainly are supportive of an infrastructure bill for all of the other things that water suppliers need. Pittsburgh, a town in Pennsylvania, is certainly one of those examples of what happens when you have sort of deferred maintenance, and that's a concern for us. Specifically for PFAS, I do think we need to look at alternate funding sources because I do believe the incredible costs. So just to put GAC on one well, for example, could be anywhere from $500,000 up to $1 million. When you're talking about other advanced technologies for the shorter chain chemicals like GenX, you're talking tens of millions of dollars. We're going to have to think long and hard about alternate funding sources for these systems because there are already a lot of great needs within the SRF program itself to deal with lead and some of the other problems that we've been talking about here.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just would urge that you all get back to us over whatever period of time is appropriate, even outside the scope of this hearing, to share with the chairman and the members of this committee what some of your ideas might be for an infrastructure bill so that we have a chance to look at them and digest them, and if things start to move in a serious way, that they get every fair consideration which they deserve. Okay? Thanks. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Before turning to Senator Van Hollen, I would point out that the 6 bills posted for the hearing today were all bipartisan bills to this committee. So